Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Very excited to be here today, and thank you so much for coming as part of the GMAT Club YouTube channel. A couple notes as we kind of get started. Please hit subscribe to be notified about new GMAT and MBA videos. And there's also a special offer as part of the session. If you subscribe, you'll get a 7-day subscription to GMAT Club. So please look for a link in the comments. And then as we go throughout the session, please feel free to like and dislike hit the like and dislike, and that kind of keeps things honest, keep it active. So great. So look, thanks everyone for coming. My name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach, and I'll give you my whole background in a couple minutes. But essentially, we're here to talk about how to get in coming from an overrepresented background, which is a little bit of a vague title to begin with on purpose. So we'll have a little bit of a presentation, spend some time kind of chatting with you. It'll be more of a one-way communication where you'll just kind of hear me talk for a little bit, take some notes, go on a coffee break, whatever makes sense. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So please take all your questions. I love questions. That's the most exciting part for me. So we'll get going with the presentation, and we'll give me 1 second and we'll share. Okay. Okay, great. So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself for those of you who I might not have had the pleasure of meeting so far. I went to MIT for undergrad, where I studied economics and business at Sloan. Part of their undergrad business program, I was a teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses on negotiations. Then I worked at Deloitte in consulting for a few years. I worked in mergers and acquisitions, mostly strategy and operation, and worked across different markets. I then went to Wharton for my MBA. I picked Wharton because when I was in high school, I actually studied for a couple summers, studied economics classes at Wharton, really liked the courses and wanted to go back for the MBA. Plus, I wanted to go into real estate. When I was there, I founded Personal MBA Coach. My best friend was originally from India, helped him with his applications to schools. He was working with a larger firm that had a bit more of a standard process with a large team of consultants, was paired with a consultant from the team. Long story short, we did his apps. He got into HBS, helped another friend that got in, another one that got into Wharton, and sort of the rest is history. So, we're top ranked consultants in many different sites. Out there, I was invited to speak at the GMAT conference last year, and a little bit more about, what we do in the company. So we help folks throughout all the parts of the life cycle, from early planning, if you're just thinking about how to improve your profile between now and when you're ready to apply to schools. We help you to pick the right extracurriculars, develop your personal story, start nonprofits, whatever we can do to perfect yourself. We have private one-on-one GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment tutoring, and I've done over 1,000 hours of tutoring last year. We work 7 days a week. We have former top admissions director on our team. I'm on the board of directors for the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. That's a group that does a lot with admissions directors throughout the year. We have a conference every year with heads of admissions. I can tell you more about that. But we actually analyze applicant profiles and determine who should, quote, get accepted or rejected. And then we have a team of former M7 and top 10 interviewers. So around 14 people that used to interview at many of the top schools on our team to help with the interview prep, and former clients to network with at every top school. So I'll tell you more about us as we go through. But today, to kind of get to the actual content, these are 4 steps for succeeding with an overrepresented background. So some people might say, what is overrepresented? We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, really have a strong personal story, right? I have a lot of folks that say, I'm an Indian male engineer. What do I do? How do I stand out? Or I'm an investment banker in New York City. There are a lot of people like me. In fact, 6 people from my company. What do I do? Focus on the personal story. At the end of the day, if you are similar to other people based on your professional background, based on demographic, or however else you might, determine that, the personal story might be something that can get you in and, help to kind of overcome the hump, let's say. Definitely outperform on the GMAT or GRE, or in some cases, executive assessment. It goes without saying, and I'm sure everybody here knows, that if you are from an overrepresented group, you need to do well on a test. So, it's just not possible to really underperform and think that you'll be getting in everywhere if it is a competitive group. And that's something to think about. There are certain groups where you want to have 25, 30 points above the median test score just to be competitive. Uh, Also, passionately court your target schools. So we put this bullet in here because at the end of the day, right, schools want people who are smart, who will be successful. They also want people who show the love for the school. And if there are a lot of people from your company or from your country, and you really go outside and spend a lot of time to show effort and network with the school, that can help. But this does not work everywhere. And we won't have time to get into the details today, but these are the types of things that we work on with clients in terms of figuring out where you should be spending your effort. So it doesn't make sense to network with this school. Should I visit here or should I visit there? And then develop a well-rounded school list. The reason this is on here, I'll talk more about this as we go on, is just because the process is challenging and it's random, right? So we have, 760 GMAT, Indian male and female, South American male and female engineers and physicists and math majors and finance folks. Some of these are overrepresented, some aren't. Some are getting into multiple places and others are not. And so if you have a well-rounded list, it helps to perfect the chances of getting in somewhere. Now, talking about the story, right? Everyone has a unique personal story, and we won't take comments here just based on the sort of technical specifications. We'll do comments at the end, but take a minute to look through this slide and these couple profiles. Think about which one feels like a better story to you. And I'll just kind of be silent for a second, and then we'll talk through it. Okay, so Jenny went to Yale at a 3.8 and a 750. Margaret went to BC, that's Boston College, with a 3.7 GPA and a 730 GMAT. I was giving this presentation at a couple companies. I do a lot of company talks. So BC is a local school for those of you not local. So clearly, I mean, Yale is a better school. 3.8 is a better GPA, and 750 is a better GMAT. But if you actually look into this in a little bit more depth, Margaret has the more unique personal story, and often Margaret might get accepted over Jenny. But we're not talking about getting accepted. We're just talking about the story. Now, reasons for the story being a little bit better. Look at the interest, right? So for Margaret, we have competitive swimming. We teach underprivileged how to swim, and we've mentored teens. For Jenny, we have music aficionado, and we're involved in this nonprofit organization that's not really related to music necessarily. Also, from a professional standpoint, we're working in major tech, so technology companies, and we want to build product management expertise after school, and eventually maybe run product at a technology firm. So it all kind of makes sense, right? It aligns together. You don't need to have everything align perfectly, but if it's easier to sell the story, it's easier to get in. And one of the key things that we always do with clients is go through this goal statement exercise, a 200-word essay where we're helping to perfect the goals, figuring out exactly what you're saying, what goes in the short term, what goes in the long term. So if you are an engineer and maybe you are in India and you want to go and do something totally different, try not to make such a big pivot. It'll be easier to sell if the pivot is actually a little bit smaller. So assess what truly makes you unique. And I'll try not to read through all the slides here, but think about your roles and hobbies and activities, right? What convinced you to do these things? Why are you doing them? What's driving you? Maybe it's some kind of ethics that drive you. Maybe it's some kind of like family practice. What are your passions? What makes you different? This can be really anything, right? I had someone recently who was a professional ping pong player. So they played table tennis, and that was the topic of a lot of their essays. It was table tennis, right? People get into Harvard Business School writing about something like chocolate. It doesn't have to be the best leader in the world. What makes you different? What makes you interesting? And if it's a professional job that makes you interesting and different, great. But even if not, there are some other side hobbies and interests that could make you a compelling applicant. And don't be afraid of that. I had someone last week who asked me about political affiliations, and they said, what if I have strong political affiliations with a group that, let's say, the average business school student does not appreciate? I said, great, I love it. Let's write about that. We want different people. We want people that will add something to the fabric of the school. So the more unique, the more different you are, the better. As long as it is not something that's too controversial or anything like ethical. So these are some examples of past themes, right? What is a theme that you were going to use to show that you're a little bit different? Focus on a hobby. Maybe you've been playing piano your whole life and you write 3 essays about playing piano. You started a nonprofit teaching piano to young kids in a certain town, maybe your hometown, or you can talk about soccer or rock climbing. I've actually only rock climbed once, and I was on a cruise, and then I fell back to the soft padded area on the bottom. So that doesn't count. I would not be able to talk about rock climbing. But if you are rock climbing and that's a real interest of yours, think about how that can develop into a part of your story. Then we put career aspirations, right? You might say, okay, Scott, everyone talks about the career. This is a boring presentation and I have something else better to do. But career aspirations can definitely be something that makes you interesting and unique. Or maybe it's not, right? It depends what the aspirations are. If you are passionate about real estate and you follow real estate blogs, you build real estate on the side, maybe you sell real estate or whatever it is, your whole ethos can be real estate, and this can be your whole story. Extracurriculars, everything can be around this one topic. But maybe not, right? Maybe health is of interest to you and you're making a little bit of a career shift. And so we're talking a lot about health and what you're doing in health kind of on the side in terms of research. Next, just background, family background, other circumstances. Think about what things make you interesting. If you come from a small village and you want to go back home to that village one day and bring better education or better systems of whatever kind that they might not have there, that could be a part of your story. I have some people that come from, families where they're the first person to ever study past middle school, or some people that come from families where there's 6 doctors and lawyers in the family, right? These are each just different circumstances, and they could mold you to be who you are today. One's not really right or wrong, but definitely think about something to do with your family and your past. However, don't focus too much on family. One thing that always kind of catches people up is if you write a little bit too much about mom and dad, right? At the end of the day, nobody really cares about your parents. They really care about you. So if you're using family as a reason behind why you are interesting, make sure that's the reason and that's not the whole story. Also, just travel, experiences living in other countries. This could be interesting. Depends what the travel is like. If you've traveled outside of your country once and you spent 3 days in a city for vacation and you went to bars and you hung out, that might not be a topic of an essay. But maybe you like to travel and take photographs. We had a client, this person actually went to MIT, did the LGO program at MIT, and also got into Wharton. And his main ethos was pictures. He took a lot of photos. When he first told me that he wanted to write about photos, I said, yeah, who cares about photos? But then he convinced me. He took photos to learn how to speak with people and learn expressions and read faces. And he had a whole website of all these faces from photos from around the world. And I said, that's great. I love that because I haven't done that. And the average person might not do that. So that's just, one example, but feel free to use your passions and travel and living in other places to highlight things for you. I know when I was applying to school, I did a lot of international consulting work, as I mentioned before. And one thing that I enjoyed doing was learning how people communicate in different groups. So one of the topics of one of my essays for a business school application was just, it was almost like figuring out how to make things work in a team dynamic with people from across different geographic backgrounds. And that was a key kind of focus for me. So I highlighted that. Now, this, on the slightly negative side, right? A personal loss, tragedy, maybe a health battle. One thing I would say here is, especially in certain parts of the world, some people might overemphasize these types of things where, my grandmother suffered from dementia and eventually succumbed to XYZ by passing last month, right? Why is that relevant? So in some cases, a personal or family loss can be relevant if it drove you to do something different. So I had a client who uh, was between Harvard and MIT in the last choice of schools, and he had a family member that needed to go to another country to get medical treatment, and he lived in the U.S. and the U.S. has decent medical treatment, but he needed to go somewhere else, and that was a real experience for him that led him to want to go into healthcare. He did not really do healthcare beforehand, didn't have much healthcare on the background, but had this whole healthcare story because had to bring mom to a country to get this health treatment that was not available in the US. And so that became a real passion play for him and the whole reasoning behind his goals, and it worked out really well. Also, just volunteer or extracurricular work. Hopefully, you're all doing a lot of different volunteer work, helping out in the community. If you're not, then you can start. So take this person, right? This guy in the middle, holding up the whole side of the house. Maybe for this person, right, the volunteer work is the first time that he's actually led people that were different from him. Maybe he just sits behind a desk and does a lot of modeling and presentations, but doesn't actually drive people to consensus. If we talk about volunteer work, then this is how we can drive people to consensus, which might help differentiate you if you were coming from an overrepresented profile of, let's say, finance people who are doing financial analysis. Well, maybe on the weekend, you go and build houses and you direct large teams of people and you develop your leadership skills in that way. Now, your theme must do a few things, right? One, appear in multiple aspects of your application. So this isn't just in one essay. It has to be relevant to the essay topics. Now, when I say this, I mean sometimes, and some advisors will overemphasize this whole personal story and theme. At the end of the day, if you want to differentiate yourself, coming from an overrepresented background, don't spend forever thinking about your theme, right? It's one area, but then you have to answer the essays. If you're not directly answering the essays, it's not worth anything. And last, it should be ownable. Figure out what you're writing and own it and be confident. And confidence is really, really important. So as you craft your story, consider where you're weaving details into essays. And I'll go over some personal story essays. A lot of you might know these. Harvard has an open-ended question, right? They just say, what else do you want us to know? Stanford says, what matters most to you and why? So these are ways to differentiate yourself. It's actually, while it's harder to get into Stanford than any other business school, it's easier to differentiate yourself than from many other schools. If you're applying to, Columbia, and we get a lot of people into Columbia, every year, but we might have 25 or 30 people going to Columbia. They're all writing similar goals essays, right? You have to write what you want to do after school, why Columbia will help you to get there, what classes you want to take. You don't have as much leeway. If you're saying what matters to you and why, you can say anything. And so you really have, the ability to differentiate yourself. And these are some less obvious, personal story essays. Chicago Booth has a really good question, and I hope they keep it this year. They kept it last year, and feel like from what I'm hearing, they'll probably keep it. But let's see. How have your interests, leadership experiences, and other passions influenced the choices in your life? So this is really asking about you and the things that you've done. They want to see you have the ability to differentiate yourself, coming from this overrepresented background, because they're not just asking about professional, right? They're asking about how have you made the decisions that you've made in your life. Darden asked, what do you want the learning team to know about you? Kellogg asks about values. So these are ways that you can differentiate yourself. Make sure to focus on which essays you can do that with and which essays you can't. If a school is asking a very straightforward goals essay, just be very straightforward. Don't try to take any risks and write, crazy things they're not looking for. So these are some examples of goals essays. We'll kind of skip over this. Next, courting target schools. Now, how to do that, right? Show genuine interest in the schools. Going to events is great. Going to MBA tours, fairs is really good. I travel and do these around the world, usually in India each year, going to these events. And I network with admissions directors, which is fun for me. And for you, it's really to try to ask unique and intelligent questions. Now, when I say unique question, I don't mean what percentage of people are going into consulting or, what differentiates your school from other schools. You really want to ask a specific question that's relevant for you so that you're showing the school that you've done your homework and you know why you're good for the school and you know something about what the school is doing. And if you don't do that, they'll be able to figure it out really, really quickly. So you're better off honestly not asking anything than asking some generic questions. Try not to be negative and critique the school. And every encounter is like an interview. Whether you hear it's non-evaluative or it's evaluative, everything can be evaluative in my mind. And so, treat every encounter like you're being evaluated. Visiting campuses is important. Now, I know people are logging in around the world. If it's far to visit, you don't have to visit. Again, I'll say that. If it's far to visit, you don't have to visit. So if you're in Singapore or in India and you want to fly over to Boston or New York, you're welcome to do so. You can certainly do that, but you don't have to. If you live near a campus, then you should visit. If you cannot visit, then you want to visit remotely. So obviously, if you're visiting in person, visit classes, schedule meetings with students and club leaders in advance. Students are really good to talk to. If you're doing things remotely, there are webinars. Schools have one-on-one chat sessions. They do coffee chats in different markets. So those are other ways that you can interact with people. And then when you're doing so, right, connecting with the students is important. Again, if you are from an overrepresented background, then there are a lot of people like you. And so the better that you make a connection with someone, the more likely that they are to recommend you, the more likely that you are to get accepted. But don't overdo this. We've had some people that have had like many letters written on their behalf, have had 10 conversations with students, each for an hour long. People are busy, so no one wants to spend more than 15 minutes on the phone with you. And if you're having a few conversations for school, I think that's enough. So focus on quality more than quantity, and find out how you can help these people. We often see people that maybe don't shine off the paper. They're an engineer with a 740 GMAT from India, but they're working at a company that, let's say, people in a business school would be really interested to get to know. Perhaps they want to apply for jobs there, so they try to help these students. Maybe they reach out and offer to do some sessions at the office to bring students, like career treks, where students can come over and learn a little bit more about the industry. And next, make sure that your school list is well-rounded. So what that means is have a range of difficulties. Now, that range is going to be different for everyone. So there's not one perfect range. We have some people that have 9 schools and 6 of them are reaches and 3 of them are safeties. Other people only want reach schools. Then we have clients that want to go for free. Our clients get a lot of scholarship dollars, many, many times more than the average applicant. And so we have people that say, look, Scott, I'm going for free. I'll pay you your fees, but I'm not paying anything to the school. And so then we pick a set of schools that can maximize the chance of that happening. But on average, we see people applying to 5 or more schools. And think about culture, think about fit. I recently was talking at another event at Forte Foundation for Women, and talked about a lot of things around, picking out schools, right? So figuring out, is it location, is it class size, is it culture, is it fit? A lot of different things to think through. One last thing to mention here, and then definitely want to leave a lot of time for comments, because comments and questions are really fun. It can often come down to a numbers game when it comes to coming from an overrepresented background. And sometimes that's hard to understand, right? You're very strong, you're very smart, you studied your whole life. But if there are, 20 people that are like you applying for 4 spots, there might be literally nothing about you that's different from the next person, except for the fact that they just couldn't take everybody. So if you're in that situation, that's where all these other, softer things can help you. Of course, if you get a higher GMAT score, that's great. But schools want well-rounded, candidates. And we have people that get into Stanford that are rejected from, Wharton and Columbia and MIT. And you think, well, how does that happen? Stanford is a lot harder. Maybe they just like them more. So some of this can be a little bit random, and depending on what people they've already taken or they haven't taken. Now, our clients go to all the top schools around the world. We had space for some school logos here. And last year, received over 4.5 million. It's actually about 5 million, just about 5 million. Number keeps climbing. So our clients are getting a lot of scholarship dollars, and often many times more than the average. Maybe multiple offers where schools kind of bid up and keep giving more money. Of course, you have to be good to get that. So a school wants you to be additive to their class, where you need to either have really high academics, or if you don't have strong academics, maybe you're going to have a big social presence. So we had a client get a full ride to 3 of the top M7 schools. I don't think because of her GMAT score, but because she was just adding something to the school from a social standpoint that they didn't already have. So how do we help you with the process? If you want some help, for those of you not familiar with what we do, so we do private tutoring, as I mentioned before. We can help with initial brainstorming, figuring out what are the things about you? What do we want to shine about what you're doing? We do story development, school selection, essay editing. I'll skip over a lot of the details about what we do, which are really nuanced. And if you want to learn more about what highlights Personal MBA Coach and makes us unique relative to what else is out there, reach out and we can have a consultation where we can discuss that in person. and a little bit of a guide for you. We have a few guides on our website. So if you want to learn more about Personal MBA Coach, I believe there's a link in here to our website. If you click on it, and then there's also this link. I don't know. I don't think you can click on this because I'm just presenting it. But you can go to personalmbacoach.com. We have a lot of downloadables and a lot of different tips and pieces of advice. Of course, you're subscribing to the GMAT Club YouTube channel. We'll be doing more videos with GMAT Club. We have videos on our website and different downloadables. This one is MBA Decision Making Guide. So this helps you to think about what types of programs are good for you. We also have a Kickstart guide as well, and various other guides, including like M7 essay analyses. So stop presenting now. Now we'll just go to Q&A at this point. So happy to answer any questions that folks have. Feel free to type them in the comment section if you have some questions. Okay, so I see first question. How do you recommend differentiating yourself in the 2+2 application, which gives preference to underrepresented groups? Yeah, so in terms of differentiating yourself in the 2+2 application, and this is for Harvard Business School, for those not familiar, you can apply as a college senior or a grad student, a first-year grad student, and apply to enroll in the school, but then they defer you for 2 years, and then you end up going to school 2 years later. First of all, a lot of schools have deferral programs in case anyone is in college and wants to think about this. Kellogg is the latest to add to this list. So how do you differentiate yourself? Really, the deferral programs are looking for someone who otherwise might not go and get the MBA. And that's one thing that's important to think about, right? They don't want someone who, or they're less likely to want someone who is on the same standard path in terms of they're going to get the MBA anyway, and may as well just kind of wait until later to accept them. So thinking about what makes you interesting, right? What are you doing after school that's exciting? And what leadership have you done in college? When we see people that get into Harvard 2+2, and we're doing a lot of the deferral applicants now, we really see something that clicks. So maybe I'm an Olympic swimmer, and that's what kind of separates me from someone else. Or I've done a few different internships, and I've always had this type of a role, but really now I'm doing something new that shows my passions for water in my hometown, something like that. Or just I'm really strong from a technical standpoint, and my technical strength is going to lead me to take a risk after school, and I really need the MBA to take that risk. So these are some things. And if you want to talk more about your profile, feel free to reach out separately as well. As you're going through the question, I see some folks that just wrote their name in Facebook. So feel free to type in the question. I guess you can type it into YouTube or type it into Facebook. Make sure that you're typing a question. Otherwise, I might just see your name. Okay, so how does it change if you were an overrepresented candidate, but if you were a permanent resident and green card holder, does it help your profile considerably, significantly? So the answer is not really. Schools see people from around the world. Some people have green cards, some people don't have green cards. It really doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of the competitiveness of your application. They are looking at you as you, and if you have citizenship or don't have citizenship, that's not a metric of evaluation. So don't worry if you have that or if you don't have that. So next, does working outside your home country help differentiate you? Yes, definitely. That's a great idea. You can give this next presentation. You're hired. But in all seriousness, it definitely helps because a lot of people, especially if you're from India, I'm assuming based on your name, a lot of our clients from India have not worked outside of India. And you can still get into a great school, but if you've worked outside of your country, that is something that can differentiate you, especially if it follows along with your goals and really what you want to get out of the MBA and the places that you want to be engaging with. So yeah, great idea to have some experience outside of your home country. So it's round 2 interview season. Do I have any advice on the Wharton's team-based discussion? Yes, so it's funny, I was just coordinating, we do a ton of interviews for Wharton. We had 18 people get accepted to Wharton in round 1. We'll probably send at least 15 or so in round 2. So we send a lot of folks to Wharton. We have a former Wharton team-based discussion interviewer on our team that conducts the mock interviews. We're doing 3 of them this weekend. So if you want to sign up, we actually have a couple more spots. We're Mostly full, but we have a couple more spots. Now, the free advice, and to do that, just send me an email. But the free advice is try to be likable, right? Think about the reason that they do this interview is they want you to be someone that they will enjoy having in the classroom, that will be fun, that will be easy, people will, get along with. So make sure that you're likable, make sure that you're friendly, make sure that you build on other people's comments. So those are a couple pieces of advice. Okay, so there's a lot of chatter about courting AdCom, alumni, and current students. How can one approach this? How big of a direct impact does this make on the application? Excuse me, overcoming a little cold. Yeah, it's a really good question, right? So my admissions director friends will hate me if I don't say this. So for those of you watching, this is for you. Don't do this too much, right? Don't be at every event and ask lots of questions and send lots of emails and ask for meetings. Right? These are busy people, and they have a main job, which is not only just talking to you. So make sure to be, reasonable as you're doing this. Now, what you do is go to an event and maybe wait towards the end of the event, right? See if people are still hanging around, or maybe go there a little bit at the beginning of the event. Have some smart questions. Go up, bring a copy of your resume, say, look, I've read about your interest in this, or I know that you often talk about this thing. Here's what I'm interested in, and this is why I think that I'd be a good fit for the school, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background. Try to see who you're talking to. If you know something about the person you're talking to, that can always help. How big of an impact does it make? First of all, this depends on the school. There's certain schools where if you talk to admissions often, it hurts you. Like, they don't care. They don't want you to do that. And there are other schools that really kind of want to get to know you, right? They want to see that you're interested in the school and that you're showing your passion. So this is a little bit school specific, but it's not super crucial. It's much, 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 much more important to talk to students and talk to alums than to talk to admissions directors, because there are only so many admissions directors. Again, these are busy people. They're traveling around the world. If you're not making great relationships, don't worry about this, too much. So you really just have to approach it casually at an event that's already scheduled. I don't really recommend just, cold reaching out to admissions folks and asking for 30-minute chats. Usually that doesn't work too well. Okay, does working with a global team virtually, will that count as international experience? It depends how picky we're being. I would say it counts as international exposure. I'm not sure it counts necessarily as international work experience, but it's international exposure. So when I was in consulting at Deloitte, right, I had a lot of international experience working internationally where I was physically based, but then I also worked remotely with a lot of folks, doing web chats and things like that. I think the remote work helped me get a sense for profiles and differences across people, but it wasn't really until I got in person where I truly had that exposure. So I don't think you get quite I don't think you get quite the same exposure remotely, but it still definitely counts to some extent. So next yes, call, yes, find out about our services, personalmbacoach.com/services. Happy to chat more about what we do. Will switching the job just before applying B school affect the application, or in other words, send wrong signal to admissions committee members? Yeah, it's a good question. It depends how close you are. If you're within a few months, I recommend not changing jobs too much. If it's February, which it is, and you're applying in the fall, you can definitely change. You can change in March. Ideally, we have 6 months. But that said, you can convince me otherwise. Sometimes it's tough to convince me, but it can work. If the job is really good and you say, look, Scott, this is giving me an opportunity that I just wouldn't have otherwise, then it's fine to switch. But also, it depends how many jobs you have, right? We have people with 8 years of experience and 7 jobs, and then they say, Scott, I'm leaving work. It's 3 months before I'm going to start another job. And I say, oh my God, don't do that. That's going to kill your application. You already have enough jobs. If you've been working at, let's say you've been working at TCS for the last 5 years, and now you want a different exposure working for a smaller startup before starting school, fantastic. Definitely, makes sense to get a new job. And yes, a reminder, feel free to like the videos, dislike, probably like is better than dislike. But vote, and that way that helps the whole process. And yeah, we'll be having live sessions as we go on, many sessions here. And as a reminder, we're offering 7-day access to GMAT Club Test for YouTube subscribers, so feel free to click below to learn a bit more about that. Any other questions can answer a little bit more, and if not, I'll just kind of keep chatting and give a little bit of advice. Sometimes we get a lot more questions. So I had a question. Yes, thank you for the questions. I had a question this morning from a client who asked about letters of recommendation, and they said, "Look, everyone from my company reports to the same 2 people. How do I stand out? I consider myself overrepresented because my boss is going to write 5 people's letters of recommendation." And so I said, well, first of all, do you need to get a letter from that boss? And we talked about it together, and we both decided, yes, we do. Because if you don't, then the next person will get the letter, and you just won't look as good not getting the letter. So you definitely want to get a letter from a boss if they're advising other people. But then we said, let's focus on certain key things that you're doing that other people aren't. So this particular person was not very strong analytically. And if the boss wrote about their analytical abilities, it probably wouldn't be that strong. So we talked about teamwork. We talked about different firm initiatives that they started. And turns out they founded some nonprofit organization within the company. They did this new mentorship thing at the company. And they were doing a lot of interesting things that, honestly, the other employees were not doing. So we had this recommender write about this, or rather we are having the recommender write about this. And I think that this will make for a really interesting rec letter, because it will just be different from other folks. It won't say, Billy was the best analysis person in the company, but it will show different things about that person. And I feel like because it's different, that will actually help over someone else who's really focused on, leading presentations or, doing quant things. So next, I have about 2.5 years of work experience and have quit my job and joined as a director of an NGO. First, congrats on the change. It's always risky and tough to make a change. And also part of many other social causes. How do you think my profile stands out? Well, Arvind, great question. I'd love to learn more about your profile offline. If you want to send me your resume, then we can, certainly give you more details. But I think being a director of an NGO could certainly help you to stand out. Now, it depends what you're doing with this NGO and what your ultimate goals are in terms of whether this is, the right path for you and whether that's a good way of standing out or not. So I would kind of need a little bit more. But obviously, being part of social causes is great. I'm looking for impact. I'm looking for leadership. So one thing that we always look at as we're evaluating applicants, both to take on as clients and then just as figuring out whether they'll be successful in the application, is to see what kind of impact they've had with the extracurriculars. So if you're a part of many social causes and you're a member, we don't need to be a member of many different social causes. We need to be a leader of 1 or 2 social causes where we can say, here was the organization yesterday, here's what I did, here's where it is today. And that's what gets someone accepted. Because at the end of the day, there's a story, right? You really want an admissions director to bang on the table for you and say, let's take Scott. These are the reasons why Scott is going to get in. And these are the reasons why Scott is better than someone else. You want someone to fight for you. Sometimes you're in discussions and one AdCom member will fight for someone else. And so you want to have a hook. And being a member of 10 different organizations, 20 different organizations isn't that hook. That hook might be being a member of one organization, but creating a new method of teaching swimming to kids that didn't grow up around water. My daughter do a swim lesson later this afternoon, so that's on my mind. Maybe that's something that helps you stand out. And they say, look, no one's done that here. Like, we haven't had people teach, swimming lessons recently, and we're located on a river, and it's nice to actually learn, how to swim. No, that was a little bit of a random example. Okay, another question. So I have worked at the same company for the same boss for 4 years with no prior full-time work experience. Hopefully you guys get along. What are your suggestions on who I can get letters of recommendation from other than my boss? Yeah, really good question. So the first question I would have for you is, who else do you interact with at the company? So maybe you do other projects with someone from another division. Perhaps you're working with marketing and you're in finance. I'm making some assumptions that are probably incorrect, but let's say you're in finance and you're working in marketing, and you're doing a project in marketing, but maybe the marketing, manager is someone that you worked with a little bit, perhaps that's someone that you could get a recommendation letter from. You could also think about other mentors. So if you're like the last person who was involved in many NGOs and hopefully has some great leadership roles in some of them, think about someone from a nonprofit that you're doing some work with. You want to avoid things like professors, anything from college, but someone from a nonprofit, maybe a client. I don't know if you're in a services business or not, but a client could be a good person to write a letter of recommendation. Or you could have the boss's boss, which isn't always the best if they're a little bit high up and they might be too senior to write a lot of details, but perhaps they know you and they know the work that you've done. Or maybe someone who's a little bit younger. Some people don't think about the person that's like 1 or 2 years their senior because it seems like they might not be, quote, experienced enough. As long as someone is above you and can talk to you and the things that you've done, it's definitely a person that could be a good source for a recommendation letter. And if none of that is relevant for you, then send me an email and we'll figure out someone. Maybe off topic. No worries. Nothing is off topic here. So thanks for asking. It's funny when I do these sessions live. Video is always weird. When I do these sessions live and we have questions afterwards, I say, ask any questions, anything that's not political. So as long as it's not political, it's certainly fair game. Any essay advice for someone looking for role and function change post MBA? Yeah. So taking a step back, right? How does someone change their goals, change what they want to do? 1, you have role. 2, you have function. 3, you have industry. 4, you could have region. 5, you could have language. I usually say there are 4 because role and function I kind of determine that they're the same. But there are many different ways to pivot, and the reason I list all those out is so that you can think that look, you're not actually pivoting in that many ways right now. If you're just thinking role and function. So for you, I would say, think about what you want to do and what aspects of that job are clearly aligned with what you've done previously in your work experience to date. So if you're changing function, but you're still doing analysis work or you're still, communicating with people, right? You want to lay out the story. So if I'm writing a 500-word goals essay, I want to write maybe, depending on the school, and this is where you really need the nuanced guidance, maybe 60 words, 70 words about the past, what I've done, how I've succeeded. Then we write about the goals, and we have a couple hundred words on that, or for some schools, 350, depends on the school. And then the last part is why the school is going to be good for me. So in that middle part, right, we're saying exactly what I'm doing, what the short-term goal is like, what the long-term goal is like, and then how the school is going to help me to get there. So depending on what you've done in the past, you really want to connect that to, for reasons for taking these next steps. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful. And yes, here's my contact info. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or thoughts about working together. And we'll be doing a lot of other videos, so watch for the other GMAT Club videos. We have other pre-recorded videos that we're overdue. We've been too busy. We need to upload to GMAT Club, so look for that on their YouTube channel as well. Okay, commitment essay from Yale, and what could be the commitments? Yes, the commitment essay. I love the essay. So there are a lot of different things that can be commitments, right? You could be committed to playing a sport. Maybe you're playing cricket or softball or something else, and you've been playing your whole life, and you were never really good, but you never wanted to give up, so you always went back, and you always tried again, and you got lessons, and you played with friends, and you learned how to play better, and you're still not good today. You're still actually one of the worst people on the team, but you enjoy making relationships with the team, and you enjoy the camaraderie, and you enjoy the trust. And one day, maybe you'll be a coach because you were never that good as a player, but you really love the sport. Right? That's an interesting twist to commitment. I just made that up now. But that's a commitment to doing something and not being good at it. That can be fine, right? You could be committed to a certain cause, social justice, free speech, clean water, right? Those are things that could certainly be commitments. A commitment is something that you spend a lot of time at, or you're trading off, right? So you're doing something and you're not doing other things because you're doing the something. So maybe you're not spending a lot of time, you're only spending 1 hour a week, but it's one important hour. It's on Sunday mornings instead of going to church. and you have to do it Sunday mornings because that's when the organization has something. Therefore, it's a really big commitment because you're also quite religious. So I'm kind of getting lost and rambling with these stories, but this is how some of the brainstorming sessions work. Any other questions? Feel free to ask any other questions as we go. We have a few more minutes left. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the time. Again, we'll be here for other GMAT Club videos. Like the video, subscribe. Oh, we have one more question. So does having, sorry, we'll have the closing remarks in a minute. Does having written and self-published a book on something like Amazon Kindle count in terms of adding value to your profile? Yeah, first of all, kudos. I used to run strategy for a publishing company, and I know publishing is a whole it's a whole nother area. So congrats on writing something. Later, I'm very curious to hear what book this is and how many copies you've sold or given away. Could be free. I think that does add a little bit of value, right? It's hard to publish something, and even doing so is a big accomplishment. So if it's aligned with your stories and things that you want to be doing in your career, I think that's great. Or outside of career, but even if not, I think that's something that's good. And we have authors. I helped 2 authors a couple of years ago, and they signed up. They were great writers. We did their essays together. They did quite well. These are professional authors, and then we've had some people that have published on the side as well. So I think that's definitely helpful. Okay, then I have this social club, Rotaract. It's quite struggling with involvement, but we are trying our best to make things work out for the club. Is that a commitment example? Yeah, so I think, look, I mean, if you have specific personal examples that you want some, guidance on, reach out and we can definitely, go over some things and tell you how we work with applicants and, what we can do to help you with your essays. I think from what I know so far, this could definitely be a commitment, but think about why was it a commitment? So if you're trying your best to make something work out and it's struggling, like what is the actual commitment? Is it the length of time that you've been doing this for? Is it the trade-offs? Are you really trying to bring other people involved in this? What is it that makes it so exciting? From what I'm hearing so far, I feel like that's a decent thing that you're doing. I'm not sure that I'm convinced yet. I tended to be very blunt and direct. So I don't know that I'm quite convinced. It's possible you could convince me for sure. Okay, and then another one. So let's see, 740 GMAT, 6.4 to 7 CGPA, CFA, US CPA, 3 years of work experience at the accounting firm, bought MSME consulting into the firm, engagements 4 years. So it looks like that's just a profile, details of the profile. I'm not sure what the question is. So I think perhaps reach out to me if you want specific guidance on what you want to do and where you want to go. Here's my contact information. Reach out. I think that's a little bit more nuanced. So appreciate the profile details, but if you want to talk about like what schools are right for you, definitely reach out, and we're happy to do that. Okay, and how to improve verbal in the GMAT? Good question. Get tutoring with us. We have the best tutors in the industry. We have super specific private tutoring. We use in-house software to guide through the tutoring sessions with modules, sample questions, explanations for all the questions. Third of my tutors are former clients. So reach out. Everyone that we work with raises their scores, and we do quite good work. Often we're on a waiting list too. So reach out soon. If you're not interested in doing tutoring, just read a lot. There's a lot of information and guidance out there. There's a lot of guidance out there around what to do and platforms and software, and you could go crazy looking at all the different material that's out there as far as the test is concerned. If you want to get better at verbal, read a lot. Just read. The more that you read, the better you'll see things. Also, start writing and start editing. A little trick that we have for our tutoring clients. So we'll often do tutoring. We'll sign up for 20 hours of tutoring, and then I'll say, let's start doing the essays now. So we're editing essays for clients for round 1 today, and especially if someone wants to improve their verbal and wants to write better, improve their writing score, the more writing and editing you do, the better you'll end up doing on the GMAT, even though that's not officially tutoring, let's say. Question about some important ways to improve your profile. for example, volunteering and things like that. Yeah, so volunteering is really important, right? Schools want to know that you will be a leader on campus. They want to know that you are going to do things to help the school. You're not just going to sit in your room and watch Netflix all day and not go outside or go out and party all the time. Partying is fine. Everyone does in a business school. But you also want to be contributing to the culture and the community. So, volunteer work, a history of volunteering is almost like evidence to show that you will be a positive contributor to the campus. And leadership within that volunteer work shows that you'll be doing something to make a change. One thing that's challenging for schools, and I was talking about this with the dean of a top 10 school recently over drinks, is students change every 2 years, right? So think about an organization, think about a sports team, think about anything. Every 2 years, everyone is new, everyone is brand new. It's really hard to keep consistency. And so it's very, very important to have people that are passionate and can make a real positive impact on the campus. Otherwise, you might not have that consistency, right? You might not have the transition from year two to year one. So, this is why volunteering is important. But again, as I mentioned before, you really want leadership. The other thing is you want it to help with your personal story. So I don't want to see someone who volunteers to be the leader of the National Association of National Associations to be on their national board just because it sounds good, right? You want it to make sense for you and to be additive to your whole story and your whole profile. So if it doesn't help with the story, I don't really care about the leadership that much. I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully that was some helpful advice. Great. So now I think that's it with the questions. If anyone else has any more questions as I'm giving my closing remarks, feel free to interrupt me and type things again. Otherwise, really appreciate you logging on. I know it's late for some of you. It's early for some of you. It's lunchtime for others. So wherever you are, thanks for taking the time away from your day, night, and afternoon to chat with me. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, scott@personalmbacoach.com. And let us know your feedback about this session by using the like or dislike button as well. And thank you so much, and look forward to interacting with you all soon.